People across Europe were recovering from the first wave of the coronavirus pandemic. A second wave has taken over the continent. Governments are once again forced to shut their economies and restrict movement to curb the spread of the virus. France has entered its second nationwide lockdown in a year. The infections in the country have now touched over 36,000 new cases a day, with daily deaths at the highest level since April. The new measures are echoing the 8-week lockdown that the country enforced back in spring. All residents have been ordered to stay at home except for in the case of essential services. Anyone leaving their home will have to carry a document justifying being outside, which can be checked by police officials. Work from office will be permitted only for employers who deem it impossible to work from home. All restaurants, bars, cafes and shops will remain shut, and schools have been directed to remain open. The new restrictions will be in place till December 1st. The first wave that hit France in spring left over 30,000 dead and businesses incurred unprecedented losses. Several hundred protesters marched through the cafe-lined streets of central Paris, opposing the nationwide lockdown. The protest was organized on social media by a disparate group of people who rampaged through streets, tipping over bins and chanting. The unauthorized protest dispersed rapidly as soon as the police arrived on the scene. Spain's parliament voted in favour of extending a state of emergency by 6 months. One of Europe's worst COVID-19 hotspots, Spain will remain under curfew until May next year. Cinemas, theatres, bars and restaurants have been forced to shut down. The government is leaving it to each region to decide its own measures, creating a patchwork of restrictions across the country. Spain is already suffering through its worst recession since the late 1930s civil war. While Madrid just wants to ban travel in and out of its territory for bank holiday weekends, Catalonia joined a growing number of regions banning entering and exiting their territory for at least 15 days. Barcelona residents were upset after Catalonia announced this ban. Catalan officials said the new measures were necessary to make sure hospitals can cope. Overworked and saturated health workers staged a protest in front of the government headquarters to denounce poor working conditions and a late reaction by politicians. Catalonia is one of Spain's major hotspots. It has already some of the toughest measures in place in the country. Over to Germany, which was less hard hit than its European neighbours in the first wave, will now enter a partial lockdown from this Sunday. All bars, restaurants, theatres and gyms will be shut for the entirety of the month of November. Chancellor Angela Merkel announced that schools and daycare centres will stay open and shops will be allowed to operate for limited timings. To 10 people from a maximum of 2 households, smaller companies badly hit by the lockdown will be reimbursed with up to 75% of their November 2019 takings. Germany will also set aside up to $12 billion to partly reimburse companies. For more details, let's quickly go across to our DW correspondent Chelsea Dulane, who joins us live from Berlin. Thank you, Chelsea, for joining our broadcast. Now, the German government has decided this week on a set of restrictions which are being called lockdown light. Take us through what these measures actually mean.
Despite the name Lockdown Light, many people don't see these restrictions as very light. They are the strictest measures that we've seen since the earlier lockdown this year. So as you mentioned before, we will see many leisure activities really canceled. So bars will be closed, cafes, clubs, gyms, restaurants, all of that will close starting Monday for 4 weeks. What's different this time is that, first off, schools will stay open, and that's a very important priority for Germany. We've heard this many times that the main priority for the government is to keep schools open, and that also has the effect of allowing many parents to continue to go to work. So that's been a big priority, and that's what we've seen here. Germany's lockdown will be less strict than other lockdowns we're seeing throughout Europe. France, for example, people aren't only allowed to go outside for really important reasons. You have to have a document to show that. So still, Germany is going to be seeing less severe restrictions than the rest of Europe in many cases.
And yet, Chelsea, the restrictions are already drawing heavy criticism from politicians and businesses. Are such strict rules actually necessary? What do critics have to say?
We have seen a lot of criticism already over the past couple of days to these measures. Part of this is what we've already seen over the past couple of months. Many people just generally don't think that the government should be restricting their rights in this way, that their ability to go outside, that this is all really an imposition on people's basic freedoms. So we've seen that criticism, and we've also heard a lot of criticism from specific industries who say that they're being targeted by these measures despite not being the source of the outbreak. So what public health officials have said is that a lot of the cases that we're seeing are coming from private gatherings, so people sort of partying at home or in these groups, not necessarily from restaurants or from museums, from concerts, things like that. And that's where we're going to see these restrictions hit. So a lot of industries are saying these rules are hitting them, even though they're not the source of the outbreaks. But because of the increase in cases, because of how difficult it's becoming to track the cases, we've heard from the government and particularly from Chancellor Merkel here that these rules are necessary to slow the increases.
Right, Chelsea, also the restrictions are sure to deal another blow to the economy. But how severe will the damage be, especially for Germany?
That's a big question right now. There obviously will be an impact on the economy, especially for industries that were already very fragile, that had already been stretched to really the limits. Things like bars, restaurants, many entrepreneurs, many self-employed people, musicians, artists, they will all be severely impacted by this. But today we did hear from the German government that they're still pretty optimistic about the economic forecast for the year. They do expect the economy to contract at a record rate this year, but they think that we could still see a bit of a recovery in the fourth quarter, in part because the industrial side of the economy, the manufacturing side of the German economy, has been doing very well and won't be so impacted by these measures. So we'll have to see exactly how this impacts, for example, consumer behavior, whether people stop spending money. But for now, the German government is feeling quite confident. Economists are a little bit more skeptical about the outlook for the economy, though.
All right. Here's hoping that it pans out as is expected on that note. Thank you so much, Chelsea, for bringing us your precious inputs.